Thank you, and good afternoon. My name is Joel Stephenson. I'm a conservator of textiles and fashion in the Gabriella and Leo Baranek Textile Conservation Lab here at the MFA. And today I'll be talking about how we prepare garments for an exhibition. I'll be covering a few key topics, including how we choose mannequins for exhibition, what happens during the dressing process that brings a garment from flat on a hanger or box to a fully realized and authentic three-dimensional form, and how dressed mannequins are installed. Let's start with how we choose a mannequin. There are several key considerations that we face with every exhibition. These are the time period of the garments that we want to display, the amount of money and time we have in our budget to buy or make mannequins. We also consider questions of ethnicity and diversity, and think about whether the chosen mannequins help or hinder the museum's mission for more diversity and equity in the galleries. And lastly, we discuss the exhibition designers' and curators' vision for the exhibition and how mannequin choices would affect that vision. Many people don't realize that special mannequins are made for distinct time periods in history. This is primarily based on the corset styles prevalent at that time and how corsets distort the wearer's midsection. Here are 4 side views of different historic mannequins from the Kyoto Costume Institute, all showing very different profiles. Remember, mannequins are plastic or fiberglass. They have limitations. They cannot bend, compress, or rotate the way bodies can, so special care is taken to make rigid, historically accurate bases on which to build. Since the mannequin can't be squeezed by a corset, it has to be made to appear as if it is already wearing one. For this exhibition, we're working only with contemporary material, so we can consider more modern silhouettes. Once we understand the time period we're covering, we have additional choices to make. In the museum, we use 3 different types of mannequins. Full-body mannequins with or without heads, as seen here at the far left in this gallery image from the MFA's gender bending exhibition, or dress forms that are primarily torsos only, seen at the center. These are from a show of wartime clothing called Beauty as Duty. Or invisible mannequins, where you see nothing at all of the mannequin, like at far right in this image of a gown from the recent show fashioned by Sargent. So at this point, we've talked a bit about time period and style, so now we need to cover budget and timeline. Most people don't realize that mannequins can be very expensive. Most museum quality mannequins are made in Europe. They cost thousands to produce and ship over to the US by boat. The budget for dress-up was slim, so we needed to rely on mannequins we had in-house. These mannequins, called schleppies, which you see on the screen, are extremely popular in museums. We have many stored in the museum attic from previous shows, which you can see at right, and since they're suited to modern and contemporary fashion, they became our go-to mannequin for the show. But what do we do about color? The schleppy mannequins have long, thin bodies. The female mannequin is 6 feet tall and wears a size 2. They have elongated features and an exaggerated curve to the spine, and really crazy long necks. In short, they look like fashion drawings or tall, skinny white models on a runway, and they're not easy to transform into something resembling a diverse population of real women. Lately, we've started to change the color of the schleppies by painting them to better resemble varied skin tones, but with limited success. No matter what color we choose, they still have an extremely Eurocentric look. This makes it difficult to work within our desire to add diversity and ethnic representation to the galleries. If we had time and money, we could attempt a project like the one at the left, where the Victoria and Albert Museum conservation staff used digital modeling to create new heads for a recent exhibition on Africa fashion. This is an excellent solution to add diversity while using your existing mannequin stock. However, this solution took $250,000 and 2 years to achieve. I do love this project though, and I think it's sensitive and smart. So I added the V&A blog information about this work to your bibliographies and encourage you to look at it later. The image at the right is from the Philadelphia Museum of Art Patrick Kelly exhibition, where they altered the skin tone of the schleppies to create a more diverse look. I think you can see that it does not completely solve the problem of ethnicity. For our exhibition, we did something similar, except instead of selecting skin tones, we decided to use the exhibition wall colors for the mannequins. By matching the wall color, you effectively dilute the appearance of the mannequin and accentuate the garments themselves. Our designer, Louisa Respondic, chose a neutral color palette for this exhibition in deep gray, black, and a sandy tan. These colors are understated and neutral and elegant, while also approximating skin tones just enough to make them the perfect choice for our mannequins. So here are the two mannequin paint colors realized in the gallery, and I want to point out just two interesting things. First, notice the way the mannequins fade into the background when they match the wall color, making the dresses really stand out. Second, notice that the walls and platforms are matte, while the mannequins have been painted with an eggshell finish. That subtle difference in sheen works well with exhibition lighting, giving the mannequins a little more liveliness and glow. So last, we need to select the specific mannequin poses for each garment. To do that, the conservator, curator, designer get together with the design lists of available mannequin poses and images of the garments to discuss several factors: the condition and fragility of each piece, to understand which garments can experience a twisting or bending pose without damage and which require a straight, quiet pose. I think a lot about the stretch of the fabric, the position of the garment closures, and existing stresses that are already part of the garment. Since the mannequins can't bend, the garments need to bend to them. So the stretch or brittleness of the fabric, the opening and closing of the dress, and any existing tears, pulls, or stresses on seams dictate the limitations of the poses that we choose. We also consider the intent of the dress designer and the mood of the exhibition. We examine the runway and owner images and determine how best to show off a dress's features and bring a feeling of motion and life to the garment. Last, we consider how the mannequins will work in groups and how the dresses relate to each other in our story. Sometimes we might deliberately mimic a pose to draw attention to the similarity between two dresses, or choose two very different poses to add vibrancy to that section of an exhibition. Once all those factors are considered and the poses are selected, we schedule dressing mock-ups for each exhibit section. We look at the group of mannequins together to see the effect of the chosen poses and to discuss ideal bodies for each individual costume. Conservators, curators, designers, mount makers, and project managers see how things look on the chosen mannequins and discuss fit, final styling, and next steps in the process. For this show, we needed 4 mock-up sessions with 5 to 7 dressed mannequins per session and a special additional mock-up just for the mannequins that will be wearing jewelry. Here are some images from 2 mock-up sessions. From left to right, we're considering the poses for the entry platform with garments by Bob Mackie, Gautier, and Alexander McQueen. As a team, we discussed the subtleties of these poses and ways to adapt the mannequins to best accentuate the dresses. On the right, curator Theo Tyson is exploring how this Valentino gown would look if the skirt were just pulled up a little farther and it were fuller and appeared like the mannequin was holding onto it. The mock-ups serve as a roadmap to the dressing of the mannequin. All the notes from the mock-up and the pose information go in a hang tag around the mannequin's neck and remain with it throughout dressing. The notes become a reference for the conservator when it comes time to alter the mannequin. Here, the notes read, slip 22 inches from waist, add panel for wave look in hem, shoulder straps 10.5 inches apart, 9 inches of cleavage, large full bust needed, add 1.5 inches of tummy, 2 inches of hips and bum, short tutu needed. This all may sound cryptic and odd to you now, but take comfort. You will understand it all by the end of this presentation. So once these poses are finalized, the mannequins are labeled with their paint color information and are prepped to go to the MFA's paint shop. The hang tags stay with them as they move from department to department through the building. Each mannequin piece has to be labeled with its Benjamin Moore color to make things easier for the painters, since they often have to take the mannequins apart to make things easier for themselves, and then reassemble them to return them to conservation. The mannequin at the left is labeled to be painted tan, and the one at the right is labeled for Benjamin Moore color 2133-10 in eggshell finish. It's extremely rare that a garment can be popped over the head of the mannequin and voila, a perfect fit. Instead, the mannequins need to be altered to fit the dress by either cutting away parts of the physical mannequin, like removing length in the legs or arms, taking out sections of the torsos, or removing curves or musculature by taking down the chest or hips. Once that cutting part is complete, we can then begin the process of rebuilding up to the ideal body shape with a soft sculpture process. We do that in foam and batting to add muscles or fat. With it, we can change the slope of the chest, the position of the tummy, or curve of the hips. The soft sculpture allows subtle changes to the mannequin to mimic the wearer's body. So just a few examples of that cutting technique. At the left, the torso has been elongated using a disc of acid-free foam. And at center, the bust has been removed entirely to make a smaller chest. And since the mannequins are hollow, the voids are filled from the interior with the material that creates an acid-free surface. The third picture on the right demonstrates an extreme cutaway for a garment with very narrow sides and back. Fortunately for this exhibition, we only needed to make one small cut. This dress, worn by Anna May Wong, was so fitted and slinky that the ridge where the mannequin top and bottom meet was very visible, as seen within the oval on the screen. To solve this problem, I removed the ridges with sandpaper until the waist was smooth, filled any voids with foam, and then made a very tight rayon jersey slip with slim straps to bridge the gap. The result is a much smoother line to the dress on display, as seen at right. The remainder of the mannequin work for dress up involves soft sculpture. This phase has several key steps. First, we add barrier layers over the mannequin to protect the costume from its newly painted surface and to give us a base onto which to sew. Next, we add layers of batting to reshape the body into the ideal form for the dress and often add undergarments to improve the overall appearance. As weird as it may seem, nylon stockings make an ideal and an inexpensive barrier for the mannequin. They don't add bulk, are easy to sew onto, and provide good protection. So we start with two pairs of nylons per mannequin, one pair for the lower half of the body, and a second pair with the crotch removed and pulled over the mannequin's head for the upper half of the body. The two pairs are attached at the waist with broad stitches to create a complete, almost second skin for the mannequin. And I think here on the right, you can see the arms are also covered. Those were some legs that were cut off from a different pair of nylons. So it must be a long sleeve garment. So over the nylons, polyester batting is used to craft a custom body, paying special attention to where the muscles and fat would be for the wearer. We're essentially mimicking human anatomy in soft sculpture, adding and subtracting material until the correct proportions are reached. Batting shapes are cut out and pinned into place on the nylons, and the edges of the batting are teased and thinned to make transitions between the mannequin body and the padding smooth and seamless. This part of the dressing process is really an art form. It entails understanding the human body and how it compresses or expands within a dress. By viewing as many primary source images of the garment as possible, and thinking about social context, and also knowing somewhat intuitively what a body should look like under any dress, it's possible to create what is essentially a custom fat and muscle suit, or second skin, for each mannequin. In the slide at the left, you can see a pink sequin dress by Mei-An. This is how it appeared at the mock-up, and its mannequin is at right during the soft sculpture process. So during the mock-up, it was clear to us that the dress needed a body with a higher bust line and a larger tummy and hips. At right, you can see the beginning of that soft sculpture transformation. For this gown worn by Donna Summer, we needed to create a much curvier, fuller body to appropriately support the dress and to remove all the bagginess of the gown at the bust line and hips. This mannequin is getting additional shaping of the shoulders, bust line, tummy, hips, bum, and thighs. In essence, completely new added sex appeal. A cover is added over each batting sculpture to contain loose fibers of batting and leave a smooth surface for the dress. For this mannequin, the cover is a tube of black polyester stockinette. And notice those two loose white strings? These are marks indicating the low point of the dress's cleavage and the placement of the dress under the arm. On the right is Johanna Tower, conservator, costume dresser, and costume historian who helped me with this exhibition. Here she's hemming our soft sculpture to fit just inside the edge of the dress, using those white threads as a guide. Our aim is to make the second skin in the mannequin unseen under the dress. Therefore, the stockinette, batting, and nylons are tailored so you don't notice them when you're viewing the mannequin. Johanna is also adding stitching to define the bust line and to keep the batting from shifting around between the cover stockinette and the nylon layers below. Next, we create undergarments needed to add motion or shape to the dresses. In these slides, Johanna is creating a black tulle tutu under the red sequin Donna summer gown you saw in the earlier slides in the mock-up. In this series of slides, you can see a white foam wedge that was attached to the mannequin to support the skirt in its wave formation. So here's the wedge right here, and it has a little waist tie, so it goes around the waist of the mannequin. This was to make it as if the mannequin were holding the skirt between her fingers. It was a concept explored in the mock-up, but when realized, we found it to seem too forced. It was too deliberate, and so abandoned this undergarment for a fuller, stiffer tutu instead. Some of this is trial and error. All the undergarments are custom and specific for each dress. For this McQueen gown, a simple bra was adequate to support the top, but a special wired slip was needed to pull the hemline out from the body far enough to read the words, "God Save McQueen." The hemline of the dress is sheer, so the slip was covered in black along its hemline to match that sheer section, making the slip invisible against the black mannequin. So now for a bit of fun, and because everybody loves a makeover segment, since you understand more about what goes into pose selection and soft sculpture, here's a small selection of makeovers from Dress Up. The images in this section are taking you visually from the first mock-up, where the dress is simply popped on the mannequin, to the final look in the gallery. Here's that beaded dress again by Mei-An. We raised the bust line and added tummy and hips, giving the dress the support needed to show off its lovely beaded hemline. Notice the change in the body's proportion and its relationship to the dress. The greatest impact came from the rebuilt hips, which add legibility and support to the lower half of the garment. I think you can see that here you've pretty much lost all this definition of this pattern of sequins, but here it's finally spread out enough so you can understand it. Next, we have the Alexander McQueen dress from the front platform of the show. This dress fit fine in the upper body, but needed a specific longer tummy shape and hips to create a beautiful cascade of sequins over the legs. In the mock-up image, you can see the collapsed and heavy sequin panel of the skirt creating this deep pleat, where after the soft sculpture, the panels are supported and the scallop design and the sequins become clear. So we're looking at primarily the collapse that happens here, and with the same pose with soft sculpture, you get this beautiful A-line shape at the bottom of the dress. Here's a red two-piece vest and pants ensemble by Emmy Studios. The runway model was far curvier than the schleppy mannequin, so we needed to add bust and hips to create an ideal fit. You can mostly tell by the bust line how low it looks in the mock-up image and how the proportions are correct on the right. Next is the gold Donna summer gown mentioned earlier, with an increased bust line, raised hips, and sculpted tummy, bum, and thighs to create a sexier, curvier body that shows off the patterns of the skirt and terminates in a small train of sequins cleverly intended by the designer. So for this one, our goal was to have this beautiful puddle train just hit the floor perfectly. And this is the same dress from the back. And notice how the sequins work now with the curvature of the lower back and hips, and how the train perfectly touches the floor at the last row of gold sequins. It's a far cry from the ill-fitting garment in the image at left. So When looking at the dress, we were really interested in creating this kind of dramatic effect in the back. Last, we'll look at the red sequin Valentino gown adapted by Donna Summer. From the mock-up at left through the soft sculpture process with her custom tutu to our reference photo of Donna Summer wearing the dress at right, you can see the full scope of the process and hopefully have a better appreciation for the art of mannequin dressing. So, once the bodies are built and the mannequins are fully dressed, it's finally time to move them into the gallery for installation. We use 2 people to move each mannequin, one to control the cart, museum traffic, and doors, and another to spot the mannequin at all times. In the gallery, the cart is lined up with the edge of the platform, and we get set up to lift. This is a short video of a mannequin lift. Please note that it takes a team of people to ensure that the dresses are safe throughout the entire lift. One person gets onto the platform and spots the neck of the mannequin. Another lifts the mannequin from its base. A third person removes the cart, and a fourth oversees the whole process to make sure there are no problems. Here, I'll play the clip again so you can see all that happening because it's very short. Once our final placement is set, the mannequin is lifted off of its base, and the hardware that supports the mannequin, usually from either the leg or the foot, is transferred to the platform and screwed in. Here, Johanna and I are supporting the mannequin while 2 of our art handlers measure the location for the hardware and drill it directly into the platform. From here, Johanna and I can gently lift the mannequin back onto her hardware. This is the same process from a different angle. Open platforms like this were used in all but one section of the exhibition. From this angle, you can see us measuring for the position of the hardware, while Johanna and collections manager Allison Murphy support the mannequin. Since the Pucci, Halston, and Iris Apfel ensembles are all wearing jewelry, these mannequins needed the added security of a case. That meant that during installation, we needed to get inside the cases to work with the mannequin. At left, Johanna and one of our art handlers are getting ready to transfer the Pucci mannequin to the case deck. Sometimes it's a tight fit for us that requires moves akin to yoga to support the mannequin while safely moving around it, especially with exaggerated poses like this one, meant to show off the pattern of the printed silk kaftan and its accompanying jewelry. In this slide, the Halston jumpsuit is moved into position, and Johanna and I are adjusting the fabric for its final look. We're arranging the pleats, addressing the drape of fabric, and centering the belt to show it at its best. It's worth noting here that even though curators are not in our pictures, that we do all these adjustments in conjunction with them, and that it's the work of the entire team that brings out the best for each ensemble. In this image, Johanna and Mei-An are securing the many pieces of turquoise jewelry worn by Iris Apfel. They're making sure that each piece looks correct, is secure, is safe, and is fully supported, and also is not negatively impacting the wool jacket below. When the mannequins wear jewelry, our mount makers work with us to secure pieces to the mannequin in a safe but visually pleasing way. At left, Brad Angel is marking a mannequin to receive the small clips he made to support the prop glasses for Iris Apfel. And the clips, visible in the oval at right, are discreet but effective. In this slide, he has added tiny brass loops to the ears of the mannequin to receive the wire hooks on these beautiful beaded earrings by Tiffany Vanderhoop. One of the more challenging objects to mount was a lightweight bag. The curators wanted the mannequin to appear to be holding the bag, but the bag itself was not strong enough. An angled shelf was made that was attached to the mannequin's arm, and in the image at right, you can see the screws that hold that shelf in place. The shelf supports the full weight of the bag, while the handle is gently tied to the mannequin hand to make it appear as if the mannequin is doing all the work. In these images, I'm tying thin nylon filament around the mannequin at the wrist joint, through the loop handles of the bag, and back around her fingers to create this illusion. Our last steps of the installation are to paint out all the mannequin hardware to match the decks for a more finished look. This helps the hardware fade from view. At left, you can see the leg mount and supporting screw plate that have been painted black onyx. We also add mylar film as a barrier between the dress trains and the decks. At right, the oval highlights a shiny area of mylar film. The train was moved aside for this picture to show you the barrier, but the films are cut to fit the trains exactly to provide protection but stay hidden. It's these small details that make the exhibition a truly beautiful experience for the visitor. I hope this presentation has given you appreciation for what we do to prep an exhibition like Dress Up. Ironically, when our work is at its best, it's not seen by the public. Visitors find the exhibition beautiful and elegant, but may not fully realize or be able to articulate why. This means that we have been successful. When we do our best work, the mannequin and the dresser remain invisible. So giving talks like this brings greater recognition and appreciation to the whole team of individuals involved in the process. And this picture on the left is just part of the Dress Up installation team trying out the selfie booth. And at the right, this is Johanna's baby, Emmy. She's our youngest fan, and she came to the museum to enjoy her mom's beautiful work. So I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
That was fascinating. My name is Mei-An. I'm an objects conservator, and I worked in tandem with Joel. And my role here at the museum is taking care of our three-dimensional works of art, and in Dress Up, that was primarily the jewelry components of the show. And following in this great theme of we do our best work if it's invisible to the public, my goal is to walk you through my thought process on how to get fragile, sensitive, three-dimensional works on view for the show safely, preparing them, working with in the team environment in the design phase, and then through the installation. And again, it's kind of a visual walkthrough on my perspective of the jewelry. And I'm going to end the lecture with some highlights from our new Kaplan Gallery that just opened right after we installed Dress Up. We moved right over to the Kaplan Gallery, which is our permanent gallery for our highlights of our jewelry collection. So I thought that was a nice marriage to kind of give you some insights on that amazing project as well. So I just wanted to start with some of the three-dimensional works that were some of my favorites. We have an Elsa Peretti bone cuff a silver bracelet that's kind of an icon of the 1970s fashion design. We have this wonderful bright yellow silk brooch worn here by Sarah Jessica Parker. A sunburst rhinestone brooch that was highlighted in Vogue in the 1960s. And then most recently, in 2021, at our presidential inauguration, we have the ring on view and Dress Up that Amanda Gorman wore during her pretty phenomenal moving poem. So all those kind of really iconographic pieces of jewelry are in Dress Up now. And those are just some of my favorites of the show I thought I'd start the presentation off with. So during the initial stages, our curator, is Emily Stohair, who's with the strawberry blonde in the middle. We start off with mock-ups, and these are really her concepts of groupings, working with our other curator, Theo Tyson, curator of fashion arts. And we kind of lay out her vision, and our exhibition designers there, our mount makers are here, our project manager, and we all come together to kind of work these clusters or compositions that fit within different casework. And my point of view is really looking at safety. How will these be supported while on view? Joel just walked us through that phenomenal process of getting the gowns to be supported. My role is to work with our mount makers to make sure these pretty sensitive works of art are mounted and supported during display. And then my second kind of role is to look at all these vast multimedias to make sure that our compositions are safe. And what I mean by safe is that we had a lot of plastics in this show, and some plastics are very stable and have a nice shelf life, but others are known to deteriorate and off-gas, really harmful acidic vapors. And it was really teasing apart, catching those plastics that have those problems, trying to make sure they're good neighbors to sensitive artworks in their vicinity and wouldn't cause damage while display. So really looking at an eye towards safety. Again, here's some close-ups of some of the cases that you might be familiar with. Our famous light bulb Chanel ensemble. Luckily, those plastics used for that to portray the glass of a light bulb turned out to be acrylic, very safe, so that was good news. Other plastics didn't make the cut because they contained cellulose acetate or cellulose nitrate that give off nitric and acetic acids, and that's where I have to really work closely with our curator to try to find some alternatives to pull them from display or put them in a case by themselves. Those are all the behind the scenes decision making that ends up really influencing the end result of the exhibition and what ends up in which cases. This is a wonderful necklace, the U necklace that's on view and dress up. And some of the thinking I work with the mount makers is how are we going to make this presentable in the case to make it look like it's floating but supporting the art. And behind all these invisible installations are really these complex, beautifully made sculptural mounts, individually made. And this mount is coming off the back. Let me get the pointer to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Our mount makers craft these incredible supports that this goes into the wall. It's behind here. So when you go through the exhibit, look for these mounts. They're quite extraordinary. And we review where the piece is structurally sound enough to support the mount. In this case, we've used the pin clasp. And then the next question is, what do we do with this silk ribbon? And in this case, it was strong enough to support itself, so they just have another secondary mount up here. But these are all the details that we walk through together as a team. Some of the beaded necklaces presented a different challenge. I was concerned about some of the inherent structure of some of the stringing, the threads used in these two beaded necklaces. Examples, let me go back. So in this case, I asked the mount makers to support these finely beaded strands. And in this case, they've stitched it to a support board. And in this case, they've cleverly made an invisible plexi support, which then they attach through multiple holes in the plexi. They've actually stitched this down to the plexi, so the artwork is being supported, and the artwork isn't supported itself while it's on vertical display. Sometimes we get around that by putting it on a horizontal, but in this case, it was really important to have them shown in the orientation that they were designed in as if being worn. So all those factors are taken into consideration with our designer, our curator, who's really kind of leading her vision, and then our mount makers, and I weigh in on the structural condition point of view. These are some examples of, the exhibition designs after mock-ups our designer will present us with. And my eye, again, is tuned into safety. And I just will walk you through some of the things that I look for. Oops, this is a display bonnet for this wonderful purse. It's a rhinestone purse in the shape of a bird. But I'm looking more at how will we make sure that this pedestal is safe in the gallery. Is it going to be secured to the floor? If it is, what type of hardware will be used? How will we anchor it into the floor? And sometimes I actually have to consult structural engineers when we get to certain weight capacities. Most of our display pedestals are made with these secret chambers that you can't see. And in this chamber, we put different materials that hold a certain RH, a certain relative humidity that's beneficial to the artwork. We call that a micro chamber. So I have to make sure that this is designed in a way that it will hold a climate over time. Is the bonnet gasketed? Will the bonnet fit into the case well? Do we have this separate chamber? Is the chamber connected to the display area? Usually we have vents so that we put our silica gel or our media that helps maintain that climate, and it interacts with the airspace where the artwork is. Is the case made out of materials that won't cause harm to the artwork? Are they inert materials? Will they off-gas pollutants? All of those kind of specs I look through with a fine-tooth comb and work with our designer and our carpenters who make these cases in-house on a very fine level. I work with our painters to make sure that it's painted in time so the paint has time to dry and off-gas pollutants. And despite everybody doing their best, it's human error, and mistakes are made, so we have to really double check and make sure that we fix those in a timely manner. These are some of my personal, I just put in some of my own notes here. These are two actually cases in Kaplan, and what I've highlighted are where are the plastics. I want to make sure we're not putting plastics that might off-gas, again, those acidic materials, next to a silver artwork that's prone to tarnishing. We need to make sure they're friendly neighbors. So that's where I'll collaborate with our scientist for plastics ID to make sure we have stable ones. Do we have dyes that are prone to fading with light exposure? So all of those important environmental consideration goes on a very close examination throughout the process. Then I start a pretty lengthy and wonderful documentation where we photograph every piece, we assess its condition, we realize if it needs treatment. In the case of dress up, it really just needed cleaning. Most of the things were inherently safe, stable, but that's where you find really wonderful details you didn't know about an artwork. In this case, this Elsa Peretti bag that Joel spoke about mounting, I had no idea they had these beautifully carved green jade ringlets that acted as a method to close the bag, and they were perfectly weighted so they fell down into this beautifully woven bamboo purse. It was just a wonderful thing to discover, and you realize why Elsa Peretti, who designed this bag, really is one of the most highly regarded 20th century designer. Just the attention to detail and function can be really astounding to learn about these artworks while we are in this intense phase of documentation. One of the techniques that we do is we examine artwork in ultraviolet radiation. This is that brooch worn by Sarah Jessica Parker, designed by Hattie Carnegie. And what we discovered under ultraviolet light, that's that black light that you can in discotheques, and it makes whites fluoresce purple. But UV light can tell us quite a bit about materials, and in this case, these rhinestones, these 5 green rhinestones shown here, were glowing fluorescent green. That is a telltale sign of uranium is used as a colorant. And we're like, uh-oh. Uranium is radioactive. And this is a known phenomenon of some artwork can be radioactive, and it's actually, depending on the level of radiation, it can be hazardous to the conservator if you're in contact or in close proximity, perhaps in a long treatment with cleaning. So we do have a Geiger counter in the building, mostly when we use our x-rays units. We use a Geiger counter to make sure there's no x-ray leaks, but in this case it is calibrated for uranium detection because we really didn't want to put this on view if it was going to be hazardous from a radiation point of view to the public. But luckily for Sarah, the levels were really, really quite low and not in the hazardous level. Another thing you might want to know is that plexiglass absorbs a tremendous amount of radiation. So in addition to it being low levels, we also are behind a plexiglass bonnet, which we did testing behind the bonnet with our radiation monitor to make sure we weren't doing anything dangerous to the public. But that was a very surprising discovery we made just through routine documentation. So after all this planning, it's time for the installation, and it can be quite a busy, amazing process within 2 weeks to see a gallery completely transformed. And here's like a Zoom call I'm sure you're all familiar with now with our project manager walking us through different planning operations. For example, as a small objects team, we're installing the small jewelry at the same time that Joel and her crew of 4 to 6 people are installing the mannequins. We want to make sure we're not all in the same corner of the gallery at the same time. And just some details about, again, what I look for during the installation. These are this wonderful long series of wall cases. Again, going back to budget, Joel mentioned budgets are always budgets, and we had the mandate that we had to reuse all of these cases from other previous shows. So that was a wonderful task. Our exhibition designer went and found cases that were already in the building that met the right criteria, that were the right size, and miraculously lined these up. And here's another view of before and after. And some details you might be interested to learn about is every one of these has a compartment here that's later hidden by the gallery label. And this is that compartment for the silica gel to hold everything at a certain climate. In this case, it's 50%. And we use silica gel, and this is a picture of the silica gel. You might be familiar by finding it when you buy a new pair of shoes or in some kind of chips, which is there, again, for the same purpose, not for eating, but to help maintain, usually to keep the high humidity out of those materials. So we use exactly that same material in these chambers, and if you look closely, there's a slit here at the back of the case. Hopefully it's invisible, not something you typically notice, but that allows the air exchange between the two compartments. This I wanted to show is the installation of this U necklace here. After now you know what the mount looks like. These are our wonderful mount makers working with our two curators, placing, doing the compositional placement. My role again is safety. I'm looking at, has the case been made properly? Is there any exposed wood products? Because sometimes we don't, those wood products need to be sealed with a vapor barrier again so they're not off-gassing. Did we make the paint dry time? Is the plexi bonnet made well so the seams aren't splitting? Did we get it on the wall? Structurally sound? Is the bonnet hitting the gasket so we hold that microclimate? Are the light levels correct for plastics? Is it in part of the, is it placed in the gallery outside of traffic? Will it get bumped? Those are all, it has this, is this wall secure? Is it structurally sound? Those are all the details that I'm looking at when I enter a gallery during installation. Dust mitigation is huge, especially with jewelry. I find that just one speck of dust can really be extremely visible, so monitoring dust control, keeping that down, final placement of the artwork, and final dusting are all the components that go into a good, successful installation. And here's that wonderful bag I spoke to. You can just see the those jade loops and this wonderful mount that Joel spoke of. I just think it's such an elegant solution, and then how she wrapped the straps of the handbag around the arm. I think this is really a very successful installation. And again, here are those little tiny, this is the level of detail our mount makers go. Those are custom made screws with this jump ring that they secured into the mannequin to support these incredible Tiffany Vanderhoop earrings. And she's local. She's from the Aquinnah Wampanoag and Haida tribe. And again, I wasn't familiar with Tiffany's work before this. I just love these earrings. She's very young. There's always a lot to discover. And this is a favorite of mine, is the Iris Apfel mannequin. These, and I put this in to just discuss a little bit about what goes into when we borrow artwork. This ensemble is on loan from the Peabody Essex Museum, which is close by. And some of the joys of my job is when we have an incoming loan is to do a condition report, a thorough examination, much like when you rent a car, you have to make sure you have to note dings and scratches. We do the same thing with artwork when it's on loan to us, because it's our responsibility to care for it while it's in our possession. And just these are the wonderful wrist cuffs that are on the model, which may be hard to see, but take a look. They're quite wonderful. So after we do the condition checking, we have our virtual courier, meaning the curator from the Peabody Essex Museum is virtually observing and guiding us through the dressing process to make sure, and she was very particular about how she wanted the composition drapery of these multiple Native American turquoise necklaces. So here we are with our mount makers, because we had to actually lengthen one of them, one of the necklaces, so it would drape right. Again, always guided by, here's our curator, registrar, and then the curator from Peabody Essex Museum. Then finally, we work very closely with our electricians in lighting. And here he is adjusting one of the overhead lights and making sure, this is a light meter, to make sure that the foot candles are at the right exposure. Mostly in this ensemble, it's really the, I think it's wool, is that right, Joel? Pink adjusting the light levels. And this is just a fun before and after. These are some of those individually crafted metal armatures that then support the artwork in this invisible manner. I think it's quite amazing work. Now I wanted to jump over to the Kaplan Gallery, which just opened. I hope you've had a chance to see it. It's near the Huntington entrance. And some of the behind-the-scenes highlights working with this phenomenal collection that is all in the MFA's holdings. This is a 19th century Chinese hairpin. It was an ornament for the hair, and it's multimedia. But what's really incredible are these bright blue passages. Those are made from kind of a mosaic of bird feathers, kingfisher feathers that have this bright blue. We also have semi-precious carved stone, glass, some plastic beads and jade coral. This was extremely unstable. Oh, here's some images of from the Song Dynasty to contemporary use of these kingfisher, bright blue kingfisher feathers for head and hair ornaments. These are some detailed shots. It was covered with dark soot, but more importantly, the feathers were all flying off these brass armatures that supported they were glued onto the underlying metal with animal hide glue over 100 years ago, and that animal hide glue has desiccated and lost its strength and tact. So as a result, really just if you breathed on this incorrectly, all the feathers were really flying off. It was kind of hair-raising on top of being fairly dirty. This is a detail of where some of the loss of those feathers has occurred on this leaf, metal leaf. This is a detail of this was a glass centerpiece of this flower that's cracked. So extremely fragile. These are some of the pieces I collected that were stuck, had fallen off, and I collected in other parts. And really, I'd have to pick it up piece by piece. These are like maybe a millimeter length, carefully, and then re-adhering them onto the metal substrate in a manner that didn't cause any changes to the color of the feather. So that was painstaking but extremely rewarding work. And once the feathers were stabilized, I did that with a modern adhesive and just my handy-dandy, tiny sable brush. Then I had to very, very carefully under the microscope clean the particulates of that coal. And this is after treatment. All the feathers are now not at risk and much cleaner and brighter. Another wonderful treatment that we undertook for the Kaplan Gallery was of this arts and crafts English brooch made by Charles Ashby. It's made from gold and silver wire. This part's silver, and then the gold wires here. We have this enameled bird, and then gemstones, moonstones here, and topaz and freshwater pearls. But when I was doing my examination, I noticed that this metal component wasn't like the others. The pearl also didn't match. It didn't have the same patina or age. It looked looked newer. And to my eye, this was a very poor modern repair. So actually, this ended up being stainless steel wire that was fraying. So in order to correct that, we removed the old repair. Under consultation with our curator, we decided to keep this pearl that was used in the repair, even though it didn't perfectly match the others. We thought it was a good enough visual match. And we got we attached a new sterling silver wire that we patinaed to match the original. In conservation, I would say it's rare to use the exact same material that the artwork is made out of. We try to differentiate it if we can, so that people can tell our repairs in the future. However, in this case, I really didn't think any other material would give us the same aesthetic quality. So we did choose the same materials that the artwork was made out of. And that's where my documentation is very important to leave in the record, so that our work is not confused with the original in the future. And this is a picture of us attaching it. And this is after treatment. I worked with our wonderful curator research assistant, Suju Chen, who's also a professional jeweler. So I asked her to do the repair work for attaching it, because she's more skilled at this than I am. So I thought it was a great marriage of both of our expertises for a great result in the end. Our curator was thrilled. So look for that. That's in Kaplan. And then another non-conventional repair method we undertook for the Kaplan exhibition is this wonderful rock crystal and enamel Giuliani pendant from the late 1800s. And what had happened is this piece once dangled here, but the jump ring here had broken off. And this piece became detached. I felt strongly that it really needed a solder repair. We needed to replace the jump ring with a solder mend, not an adhesive like an epoxy mend, which we probably would do in the museum setting, is choose a reversible glue rather than a permanent solder repair. But after considering the two different options, we decided that we really needed structurally, we needed the strength of the solder repair. We don't have that expertise in-house. This is a detail of, here's where that attaches, and here's more pictures of the broken element. We reached out to North Bennett Street School, to their jewelry making and repair program, and we found a laser welder which allows you to spot weld perfectly in place exactly where you need that solder to go, so we did not have to worry about heat transfer to the pearl or to the enamel, which was a big consideration when you choose soldering, not to heat the whole piece, because that would not have been acceptable. And here's Haley performing the repair. This is the original. She recreated the jump ring in 14 karat gold. The original is 18 karat gold. Again, we did that analysis in-house with our scientists, and that was important information to know that this was 18 karat to pick the right solder. And then we asked for 14 karat just so it's a little stronger. And here Haley is soldering that right in place, and there's no heat transfer to the original. Again, that was critical in deciding to go with this. And here's the piece, with the jump ring. And then she's more skilled than I am. So I absolutely trusted her without gloves, but clean hands to reattach that missing element. That was a really wonderful collaboration, and here it is repaired. And now I'd like to leave you with 2 video clips doing macro photography video, or I guess it's called macro videography, of 2 pieces in the Kaplan Gallery. Was new for the MFA, including myself and our film team here. We chose to do a couple of pieces in Kaplan that represented movement, and my role was to make sure that during the movement sequencing that was done in a safe manner, but more importantly, as you'll see, was cleaning to a very high level that I haven't been asked to make sure the pieces were cleaned before, and I'll show you why. But here's our team with the starfish brooch and this wonderful emerald and diamond brooch designed by the Hyman brothers for Marcus, Marjorie Merriweather post brooch. And I'll show you, here's the video. We had to redo it because we could see every speck of dust and grime. So getting all these facets to glisten was an intense process, but it's pretty spectacular. So discovery and teamwork is really part of the wonderful benefits of working here. And thank you. Do you want to come up for questions, Joel?
I have one to start.
Okay, yeah.
I wondered if you had to do the cleaning under the microscope.
I did, yes.
And how that
we tried first without under the microscope, and we all saw the dust, and then I had to take it back to the lab and meticulously clean it in the starfish. That's a great question. The question is, for mount makers, is it a permanent job or do you move around? At the MFA, we have two small mount makers that do the small mounts. We have one person that works on large mounts for heavy artwork. But on top of that, we do have to often hire a contract mount maker who lives locally, and he's in private practice, and he moves around institution to institution for these object-intensive shows. So the answer is both.
How does one or why does one become a mount maker? What is their educational and or professional background?
Usually they're artists with fine manual dexterity, often with brazing skills. I know we have one student from North Bennett Street School that went through the jewelry repair program who's been interning with us, which is a great fit of skill sets.
And what is your educational and professional background that you see as your mission, the safety of this artwork?
Yes. What is our educational background for conservation? Joel and I have gone through master's programs specifically for art conservation. Getting to that point of being eligible to apply usually means you have an undergraduate degree in art history or studio art or science. There's a large science component, but applying to graduate school requires coursework in all three of those disciplines on top of a portfolio. We often work in the medical profession and internships to get training, hands-on training, and graduate programs are looking for a portfolio in art conservation treatments as well as a art portfolio to demonstrate hand skills.
For me, I started in graduate school as an objects conservator like Mei-An, and then just through happenstance, I moved toward textile conservation in my career, and for me, it was a really nice marriage of skills because I could look at textiles as three-dimensional objects. So for me, the transition was a little bit easier into sculpture and other processes we need for costume conservation. But the hand skills that we get in graduate school, it's an intense training course, and it really prepares you to work with materials of all kinds when you leave the program. I couldn't hear that, but...
It's someone's cell phone.
just thank you. That was incredible and really fascinating, because when you go through the exhibit, you have no idea like how much work went into it. I mean, I knew a lot of work went into it, but that was just unbelievable. What's the time frame from when you know an exhibit is supposed to open, from when you start, doing all the conservation?
Time frame, how long did you have?
It's a long process, actually. Usually we hope to have a year from when we get the initial conservation request to view garments and accessories. So usually there's a much larger list that we see, and then we start conversations as a group to see which objects we have the time for in terms of conservation. And sometimes, that process takes several months, and then we probably work in earnest for 3 or 4 months before a show goes in.
Thank you for the lecture. I have a question, curiosity. You talked about that brooch that had the uranium that you could see in the microscope. It happens to garments too, like dresses that from like the 1800s that like have some material like that in the paint on the.
What was the question?
Do you ever see radioactive materials being integrated in garments?
Oh, no, actually, I haven't seen that. We do have to have discussions about whether we're nice neighbors or not, because often Mei-An will be looking at silver jewelry or other jewelry with a very easy tarnish ability, and I'd be working with silk or wool, which can shed sulfur. And so sometimes we're really like having these long discussions with the curators and between ourselves as to like, how would we solve this problem, and is it solvable to have these two materials together? But I haven't really seen that. Occasionally we have materials like arsenic that could be part of our a dye, or sometimes we have pesticides on things that have heavy metals, but I haven't really experienced anything radioactive.
How squeamish I was, like the artificial intelligence or machines or like women models. It's weird how that really triggered something in me, like with your first presentation of like cutting off the model's arms. And did you ever have that, or is it just me seeing it?
About the uncomfortability.
Squeamish, yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely this uncanny valley thing that happens with mannequins, and they're kind of giant dolls, and they have this kind of eerie creepiness to them, but after working with them, you get kind of used to that. I don't know. I get used to the idea of cutting them down. I think of them as just supports for the dresses. The dresses are my love. So, I don't really think about it too much, but it is quite a shock when we send them down to our carpenters and we ask them to cut the breasts off or cut the limbs, and they just look at me like, "Are you serious? You want me to do this?" But it's really necessary. I mean, how many people do you know are 6 foot tall and a size 2? So.
When displaying a silver object, how much tarnish do you clean off if you have to clean it? Because there's the whole thing where if you clean it completely, it looks brand new, but also it can be obscured.
Yeah, that's an excellent question that I didn't go into. Is the tarnish removal on silver is very difficult in that it varies by piece how much we clean, and sometimes I have the curator sit right next to me and I'm her hands, and she has to tell me as the expert which tarnish is negligent tarnish and which is patina and history and don't touch, and it varies the gamut from I want this sparkling clean without any tarnish to don't touch that at all, nothing. So, and it runs the gamut, and whenever I clean silver, I absolutely consult her. If not, have her sit right next to me, because it's that sensitive of a decision-making. I can clean all tarnish off, but I need her to help me with the judgment of what's appropriate and what's not. Yeah, that's a great question. We use precipitated calcium carbonate because it leaves a very beautiful sheen with it's the right, we look at the microscopic level of scratches created by our cleaning products, tarnish removal, and calcium carbonate has the right amount of strength to kind of get through the tarnish, which is very hard. Silver sulfide can be difficult to remove, but it can cut through that without over polishing, without causing a lot of scratches. We don't do chemical treatments unless in extreme cases we'll go to a chemical cleaner after a lot of consideration. But our go-to product is precipitated calcium carbonate.
When you were when you were talking about a piece that had the kingfisher loss,
Yeah.
feather loss, I was wondering what you do when it is not either politically correct or environmentally correct to repair something the way it originally was.
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't restore the losses. If I was going to restore the losses, I probably would have achieved that bright blue color on like tissue paper and made it look like a feather and stick it on, which is in my skill set to do. In this case, we thought the losses weren't visually distracting, and we didn't go forward with the restoration, but I would have applied that with a glue that was easily removable, that aged well. But in this case, we absolutely would not use kingfisher feathers. Yeah.
When you're doing costume mounting and you're thinking of you're doing your research, looking at like how a model wore something, not everything that's on a runway looks like it fits the model, but you need it to be supported. Where do you find the middle ground? I guess the answer is the question, excuse me.
How do you find the middle ground in fitting a mannequin with a historic costume? The middle ground being between...
Like something that just like, say, I'm thinking of something maybe that a model wore on a runway.
Oh.
And then something you needed to be supported in the exhibit. It hung on it didn't look right on the model, but you needed to look right. Do you just say, scratch what the model is wearing and let's fit this up?
Yeah.
Fit this mannequin out.
I think it does make sense. I understand. I think we use all of these primary sources as a reference. It's like this big cloud around what we're trying to achieve in the exhibition, right? And we pull from that cloud when it works, and we look at things when it doesn't and make that decision. Ultimately, it's the story that the curator is trying to tell with that object that's paramount. So if the story is more about the wearer and not really about the designer, then we kind of look at the owner images and focus more on that. If it's more about the moment on the runway, then we would alter the mannequin and alter our interpretation to mimic that. So it's a push and pull, really. The dress ultimately tells you what it wants. So we try to listen to it.
Okay, I think we are all out of time for questions. Thank you folks for coming to this series. There is a survey that you were handed, if you wouldn't mind filling that out and then passing that back to our ushers at the top of the room. Thank you.